Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, on into the alphabet tier list. This is the most high thought out and prestigious tier list you'll ever hear about the alphabet. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you go watch my other videos. But before you do that, let's get straight into the video. So here we have the tier list on the screen. We have S, A, B, C and F. It's going to get confusing, so let's take a minute to bear that in mind. Okay, so the tier list goes: S tier is godlike, A tier is good, B is meh, C is boring, and F is doo-doo. So bear this all in mind as we go through this, okay? So to start with, we're going to start with A, and A we are going to be placing within the A tier, not because A is in A, it is because A, when capitalised aggressively, has a nice point, like an Eiffel Tower. Very snazzy, but its lower cases, it's alright, it's just a regular A, it's just got the circle with a little swoosh, so it's pretty good. So we're going to put it in A tier. Next up, of course, we have B, and B is going to go in C tier, because honestly, it's just pretty boring. It's two circles on top of each other. The only good the capital comes out with is you can make a penis with it, using an equal signs and a D. So we are putting B in C tier. Next up, of course, on the alphabet is C, and C is going to be going in S tier, because, I'm sorry, C is a godlike letter. First of all, it's the start of my name, Chazza, which, might I add, is a phenomenal name. No bias, of course. And also, there's so much similarities between C, capitalised, and lowercase, that it makes it just perfect. And so that is why C is being placed in S tier. Next up we have D, and D is being placed in A tier as it's just a pretty good letter, I think. Overall it comes with some strong words. Start with D, like dinosaur, that's a pretty good word, and there's many others, so I think D belongs in A tier. Next up we have E, and E honestly is in F tier. It's just a pretty just terrible letter. I can't really think of anything good about it, except for the fact that the capital's pretty cool, because it's nice and easy. You have a line, and you have 3 lines coming out of it. Other than that, what words can you name that are awesome with the letter E? I can't think of any. Next up, we have the letter F. Now, F is going in B tier, because honestly, it's the same as E in its capitalised form. Its lowercase is completely different, but you get some strong words out of it, like fuck, which makes it so much better than E, and that is why F is going in B tier. Following F, we have a G. Now G is going into S tier because G is a pretty cool letter. You've got the capitalised G, whereas the circle with the line going through it, and that was always fun to write. And you've got the lowercase g, which is a circle, but it's got a little swooshy tail, and I think that's pretty cool. So we are ranking G in S tier. Now, our next letter on the alphabet is H. And H, it's just a generic letter. I think it follows F's kind of standpoint. Similarly, with its design, you've got the capitalised, it's very structured, it's very smooth, but then the lowercase, it's a bit more curvy with the lowercase h. And I mean, there's some pretty good words that come out of it. I mean, H is the start for hello, and that's quite an important word for greeting people. So we are putting H in B tier. Okay, so for the next 4 letters, we're just going to quickly spitball them and chuck them into the tier list. So I is going to go into C because it is generally just a pretty boring letter, capitalised or lowercase. J is going to go into F. It's basically I, but it's got a more complex swoosh to the bottom. Like, it's just unneeded. K and L are both going to go into B because they're okay. There's, K is just an I with a kick, and L is just an I with a long, or an outshoot at the bottom. When it's capitalised, that's basically it, really. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about M. Now, M is a pretty strong letter, I must say. We have such words out of M like monster, and mobs, and mighty, and, well, mega. Very big, statuous words, and letter's pretty good. You can see with the capitalised, it's much bigger and it's much more structurally formed, whereas its lowercase is more curved, it's more softer. So that is why we are placing M in A tier. Now, following from that, we have N, and N is actually pretty similar to M, except for the fact that it's kind of halved, and I think that is why we're putting N in C tier, because it's just pretty much a copycat of M, but just less. if that makes sense. There's less to N than there is to M. So that is why N is being placed into C tier. Next up we have O, and O is pretty an average letter, but we're going to put it in A tier because it's just so simple to write. It's literally a big circle. Now, it's not in S tier because of how simple and easy it is, simply because it can easily be mistaken with a 0, and so we're going to put O in A tier. It's a pretty good letter, but it's not S tier, it's not godlike. Now next we have P in the alphabet, and P is going to go straight into S tier because I think P is such a strong and powerful letter. Literally powerful begins with P, so that is why P is getting placed in godlike for S tier. And following nicely straight on from P, we are also placing the next letter in the alphabet, Q, straight into S tier, because Q I think is an awesome letter. It takes O's awesomeness and just adds a little line. And that is also the same for its lowercase. You add a little line down from O's circle nature, and I think that makes Q a pretty cool and fun letter. Now our next letter on the alphabet is R, and R is generally just, it takes P and it just makes it a little bit more complex, and not in a good way, and just adds a line through it for its capital, which it takes P and it adds a line, and it's just not great, and its lowercase is generally just, there's so many ways to write R that it becomes messy and annoying, and it's one of those just weird letters. So we're putting R in C tier as it's generally pretty boring and pretty frustrating sometimes. Next up we have S in the alphabet, and we are putting S into S tier because S is literally a godlike letter. It's literally the letter that starts subscribe. And that brings me on to, make sure you guys subscribe from this video, because I'm sorry, you have just spent almost 7 minutes listening to me rank the alphabet in the tier list, and I think that warrants you subscribing to this video. So make sure you hit the subscribe down button, and if you don't, I will come and find you. I promise you, I will come and find you. But anyway, yes, S is going into S tier because it's similar to C. It's same capitalised and lowercase, but just bigger and smaller, and I think that makes it a good letter. Next up we have T, and T is going to be placed in A tier because T, well, it's a pretty good letter. I think it's pretty cool, and we get some notable things out of the letter T, such as tilted towers. So that is why T is going into A tier, because it's a good letter. So we are actually coming very nicely and closely to the end of the tier list, and with the next two, they are both going into F tier. They're pretty doo-doo letters, and that is U and V. I think these guys belong in F tier because they're just basically the same and just pretty boring and generic. U is more curved than V, and V is more pointed than U, so they're pretty much the same. They follow along from each other, and I think they are just worthy of being placed into F tier. Now, following on from that, we have W, and W we're going to actually put in B tier. Now, I think W is basically a double V, which makes it slightly more interesting, but in some sense it's actually quite fun to just write the W. If you write the W, it's a lot of fun, and I think ultimately it is an okay, it's not great, but it's meh, and that's why it belongs in B tier. Wow, okay, the tier list is getting pretty busy now with all these letters, but we've only got 3 more to go. And next up is X, and I think X is a fucking awesome letter, and I think it is a really cool letter. Tell me how many words you know begin with the letter X, other than like X-ray and like, I think xylophone begins with X. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think X is a pretty cool letter. It's simple, it's just X. I mean, it's used in so many different ways. Like pirates, X marks a spot, you know, on like a treasure map, or like on the ground, if pirates were stupid and they actually marked their treasure with X. But it's used in so many different ways, and I think X is just a top tier letter, and that's why it belongs in S tier. It's a godlike letter. Next up we have Y, and I think Y belongs in A. It's a good letter. It's used too much though, and I think it's got a very cool structure to it. I think as a letter it looks pretty cool, but it's used so much. You, your, all of those, you know, different abbreviations of your and stuff, and it's overused so much in different ways, different languages and stuff. So I think Y, sorry, it goes to A tier. It's a good letter, it's a useful letter, but it's not a godlike letter. And finally, from the alphabet, we have Z. That is our last letter that we have, and it is going into S tier. And I believe Z is S tier worthy because it's a pretty good letter. I think it's not used very often. We have zebra that begins with it. That's all that pops off my head right now. And also it's used in like cartoons when a person's sleeping and going, and the Z's are coming out of them. So I think we're going to place Z in S tier, and I think that's its final ranking, and I think that's the best place to put it. Okay, so there we go. We have officially ranked every single letter in the alphabet in a tier list of best to worst, and let's have a quick look at it overall just to round up and finish up today's video. And there we go. That is the tier list officially finished. This is my tier list, obviously, but it's pretty bulked out towards the top of the tier list. You know, S and A have got lots in there. And so let's have a quick run through it and look at what we've got. So in S, the godlike letters, we've got C, G, P, Q, S, X and Z. All pretty awesome letters for their own reasons. And then A, some good letters. We've got A, D, M, O, T and Y. Also pretty good letters, not too bad. B with B being meh. We've got F, H, K, L and W. C, they're pretty boring letters. We've got B, I, N and R. And then just for the absolute doo-doo letters in F tier, we have E, J, U and V. So there we go. So with that finished, please in the comment section let me know what your tier list maybe of the alphabet would be if you really want to spend the time. But ultimately, thank you for making it all this way into the video. And if you have made it this far, please subscribe and like the video. You clearly enjoy listening to someone ramble on for about 10 minutes about ranking the alphabet in a tier list. But I hope you did enjoy. Make sure to go check out some of my other videos. And yeah, ultimately just like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye.